It's not just Naval Academy and ROTC. There's like 10 other ways to get in. Only 1 out of every 10,000 people that apply, like where you guys are right now, are going to get to fly a fighter. And I was like, oh no, like I was crushed. I'm like, I'm not a 1 in 10,000 guy. It's not me. I'm already going down there expecting to fail. And I shared that with my dad. And here's what my dad said, just so calmly. He goes, listen, when you get down to Pensacola, it's Naval Air Station Pensacola, where we do our flight training. He goes, there's going to be a student that everybody else is talking about, I'll guarantee you, because there always is. He's going to be a few classes ahead of you, so you are not competing. And he goes, go buy the guy a beer, get to know him, and ask him if he'll share with you what he's been doing, because I'll guarantee you he's probably doing something differently.
Thriving in Tandem. It's a podcast for you, the married entrepreneur that wants to win in business and marriage at the same time.
Welcome to Thriving in Tandem.
Here we are with John Ramstead. Honey, I know you've been waiting for this episode, this interview for a while, especially because we just saw Maverick not too long ago. John's a former combat Navy pilot. Yes, he was on his way to Top Gun before something happened, and we're going to get into that story. Now he's a transformative executive coach and compelling voice behind the international podcast. You know it, honey. Eternal Leadership.
Yes.
Right? Because we were on it not too long ago. So definitely look that one up. And also the best-selling author of On Purpose with Purpose, Discovering How to Live Your Best Life. And Inc. magazine lauded him as one of the top 12 podcast leaders you need to listen to. So this is going to be a great interview. And when you hear that introduction, right, you say, okay, he's got it all together. He's been on that trajectory, right, for success and all that. But you're going to hear, and I think it's always good, when you see people like this and where they are now, it's always good to hear the story of some of the challenges they've been through and how they've had to fight through that.
I know, because it's easy to think, oh my gosh, he knew, and since he was a child, he wanted to be a fighter pilot, and then he was living his dreams, and everything just fell into place so simply.
Yeah. And John, when we were in San Diego a couple months ago, Kaylee wanted to do the Top Gun tour. So we were staying in Coronado Island, number one. So of course there's the Navy base right there, right? But then we had to go to the bar where they had the bar scene, the piano scene, and then we went to the house, right? And so anyways, all that to say. But anyways, John, thank you for coming on the show. We're so looking forward to this interview.
Oh, it's great to be here with you guys. And I just love your energy. So we're going to have a lot of fun today.
Yeah, especially since before we even got on the call, I think we just booked a trip to Italy.
Oh, I know.
I'm not sure how that happened, but somehow we're going to be in Italy with John and his wife somehow. I don't know. We'll see how this happens.
I invited myself.
Exactly. So,
I think it's how that came about.
There was that too. But John, let's get right into this. Since we talked about, Top Gun and your background, you've got to know, how realistic was the movie? Both the original and of course Maverick.
Well, how about this? It was an amazing movie, and it is not a documentary. How is that? But I got to tell you, the flying was very realistic. I actually used to be what was called a LAT instructor, low altitude tactics. What they did, that kind of flying, is something that the military trains for, teaches. It's very dangerous, and the speeds that they fly it at. So there was a lot of things in there. Now, some of the things like in air combat maneuvering, remember when the two planes are flying, next to each other, and he comes up between them and they kind of roll away?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be done. That would never happen. If you ever did that, that would be your last flight ever in the Navy. But I understand the cinematic effect of that. But a lot of what they did was absolutely, I've been in a lot of those situations. So for me, I'll just be honest, I've probably watched the movie a dozen times.
Wow.
The flying scenes are that good. Like, it brings me back. I'm sitting at night and there's nothing on and I got to do some work. I'll put it on and it plays in the background and I love it. And I thought it was better than the first one. And the first one is actually what got me into flying in the Navy in the first place, because it came out in 86 and I was a junior in college in 86. So and I was in Navy ROTC. So when that movie came out, I was like, okay.
So you weren't like a child. Sorry, honey. Just going to ask this question. Like 5 years old and you're like, I want to be a Top Gun pilot.
Well, it's interesting. So I was kind of the awkward, introvert, kind of chubby kid that played in the orchestra that got bullied growing up. I had honestly a very, very low self-image. My time, like, I don't have any fond memories of high school. I went to an all-boys Catholic high school that was kind of absolutely kind of alpha male, athletically dominated. I started really playing sports maybe my senior year, but I grew like 6 inches from the summer before my senior year and when I stopped growing. Like, I was a late bloomer. And so just a quick story. I got to college and I always I loved reading. I was a history buff. So I studied all about the submarine war in World War II and the air war. And I thought both would be fascinating. They appealed to me for different reasons. But I go, you know what? I want to be a fighter pilot. But so that was the direction I was heading in. And I got to tell you, I saw the movie and all this stuff from childhood came back. And I probably had a different reaction to the movie than everybody else in the theater because I was in the position to apply for it. And I was crushed because I'm like, I could never succeed. I would fail. I would embarrass myself. I never even told anybody my reaction. I got back to college, Kaylee, and I didn't even apply for flight school. I applied for submarine service first, surface, and then intelligence. And I remember my dad was talking to me at some point, and I finally shared with my dad. And he's like, and my dad was he's such a great man. He passed away a couple of years ago, probably my best friend. But he goes, John, this is a dream you've had. And I know you'd do great in submarines and you would excel, but I don't think you would have the joy, that you'd have in flying. And he goes, you know what? Why not bet on yourself? What is the worst case that happens? Like, let's say you go there and you can't cut it and you do fail out. Well, guess what? You can go back to submarine. You could, right? I'm like, well, I think so. He goes, well, you know what? I think you should give it a shot. And that gave me the courage to go back to my class officer and say, you know what, can I change my selection? And I ended up getting into flight school. And I tell you, this is let me share this story. This is some of the best advice I ever got. So I got into flight school. And I could not have been more excited. I was in a fraternity. I bought everybody in the fraternity literally a keg of beer. We had a party because I'm going to flight school. And it was Bass Ale, by the way, and I'll never forget that.
Hey, at least you didn't go with like Bergie beer or Bud Light. You actually went big. That Bass Ale.
Well, you know what?
That's a lot of money.
I was in upstate New York. The worst beer I've ever had is Genesee Cream Ale. Anybody out there, of you that are listening that have heard of it or even like it, I don't get you. I'm just being real. But so then our class officer, we're wrapping up the school year, and he goes, listen, I just want to set expectations here because Top Gun made this, naval aviation so popular. People are applying every possible way to get into the Navy. It's not just Naval Academy and ROTC. There's like 10 other ways to get in. Only one out of every 10,000 people that apply, like where you guys are right now, are going to get to fly a fighter.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, no, like I was crushed. I'm like, I'm not a 1 in 10,000 guy. It's not me. I'm already going down there expecting to fail. And honestly, not in a good headspace. I don't even know if that stat was true, but that's just what he said to us. And I shared that with my dad. And here's what my dad said, just so calmly. He goes, listen, when you get down to Pensacola, it's Naval Air Station Pensacola, where we do our flight training. He goes, there's going to be a student that everybody else is talking about, I'll guarantee you, because there always is. He's going to be a few classes ahead of you, so you are not competing. And he goes, go buy the guy a beer, get to know him, and ask him if he'll share with you what he's been doing, because I'll guarantee you he's probably doing something differently. That's the advice my dad gave me.
Wow.
I get down to Pensacola, and everybody is talking about this guy, John. And I meet him, and he's older, he's, 6 months. He's 6 months ahead of me. And we developed a friendship, and he shared with me exactly what he does and how he prepares and how he gets ready. And for me, it was totally counterintuitive. Keely, I would have not stumbled on that on my own. And then he started helping me. He started helping me, be accountable. And because of that, because of his mentorship and me putting in the work, I ended up graduating #1 in my class and being able to go to the jet pipeline. And then I graduated #1 from my jet pipeline class and was able to choose to fly the F-14. But think about what that life lesson was. You know what? Go find somebody, whether it's your marriage. How about this? trying to find a mentor, and you have a lot of entrepreneurs listening, go find an entrepreneur that's succeeding in life and they're succeeding at home, because that's the person you want to get advice from. Because what if I go get advice from somebody that's succeeding at work and they're on their third marriage? Well, I'm going to probably have the same results. So I think, in life, we have to be what I call a fruit inspector. But, go find somebody that's done what you want to do. Go find out what they did to get the results and ask yourself, are you willing to do that? Are you willing to do what others might not be willing to do to get those results? And then if you are, you got to commit. And so my whole life, I've just kept repeating that. Every time something's changed, I don't even know, up from down, and I got to make a big transition. I'll go find somebody, talk to people. And so mentorship for me in every part of my life has been huge ever since then.
That's great. I mean, your dad.
Yeah, starting with your dad.
I mean,
I know. I miss my dad, man. I talk to my dad every single day up until the end. I miss Dad.
So, he just must have been an observer of people to have that thing about, there's going to be somebody everybody talks about, and he's going to be years ahead of you. So, which means that he's not competing, but he can probably mentor you to go by the gear. I mean, he must have done it himself, obviously, but
somebody spoke in his life.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you know where he got that from? Because that's wisdom right there.
That is a great question, Robert. Maybe I'll get to ask him someday in heaven, because I never said, Dad, what? Where did you get that wisdom from? I never asked that question
that was so specific. I'm like, where did he get that from? But yeah, but as you think about it, you're like, oh, he's right. If you think back in our circles of my experience, you're like, yeah, there's always that person everybody's talking about. And no, that's awesome. That's amazing. That's great. That's great advice. I love that.
Well, and I also love too that, John, that you were so teachable and coachable, because a lot of times, especially when you're younger, well, maybe age doesn't even matter. It's like, we know it all. Don't tell me I'm going to figure it out on my own, or I don't want to listen. So when the guy was mentoring you,
I think I'm fortunate in the fact that I've been humbled so many times that I have actually come to the conclusion that I know that I don't know it all. Right. And I don't think, even with everything I've done in my life, I never want to be seen as the guru or the expert, because that kind of speaks to me as somebody who's like arrived, right?
Yeah.
Like I see my role now and what I get to do coming along such amazing organizations, but it's almost like the Sherpa. Like I might only be a couple steps ahead of you, and I might have some experience you don't have, and you guess what? You're going to have some experience that I don't have. So I learn as much from my clients that I hope as I give to them in the work that I get to do. But I love that role because you're constantly learning, you're constantly challenging yourself, you're constantly growing. And here's also what I've learned. Every time you reach a whole new level of success, you are then rewarded with a whole new level of unconscious incompetence. Does that make sense? Like all of a sudden, like you reach this level and now you want to go to the next level, but you don't know how to get there. So what was easy over the last maybe few years to get here is now like new territory. And you're like, well, I should be able to figure this out. Like this transition to, marriage being empty nesters, which is new to us. I got to tell you, Don and I have had some rough patches going through this. This is like a whole new season of life. It's not even a new season. It's like we closed we closed the book and we're writing a whole new book. It's not even like a new chapter. It's almost what it feels like.
Yeah.
So we've had to reach out and, we're working with somebody to just help us right now with our marriage, a good friend. And then we're going to go to this marriage retreat we told you guys about, but we're like, we got to invest in ourselves, in our relationship, especially with how busy I am, building my company. Because if I know if I don't, we'll get to a bad place, which we've gotten to in the past, which is, it's not fun to dig yourself out of a hole.
Yeah. So since you opened up that door, I'm going to go into it. How did you recognize that? And how did you have the courage to say, hey, we need to do something about this? Because there's too many couples that have been married longer than you have and us that just keep doing it. They just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And they're just kind of unhappy and they're just dealing with it. And next thing you know, they're just leading separate lives and they just keep going and you just figure that's what we're going to do for the rest of our life. Yet obviously the two of you are trying to be intentional. And so is it something you recognize? Like, is there a ha-ha moment or maybe a series of events? And how did you come to that courage to say, we need to do something?
Yeah, well, I think one of the keys in, whenever we have I think, gotten into some, I guess, rocky territory. And we've gotten into some very rocky territory. I don't know if it reminds me of that. There's a song by Casting Crowns called Slow Fade.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is you're aligned, you're having a blast, you're happily married, and then I'm working crazy hours, and little patterns come up, little resentments here and there. The next thing you know, date nights aren't being honored, and then the next thing you know, it's 3 years later, and you feel like you're roommates.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's another year later, and you don't even want to come home because you're not going to get a hug when you get there. And this is where I got to, Robert. This is let me rewind the tape like 12 years ago. I was working 60 hours a week, building a company. Donna's dream was to be a stay-at-home mom, which she was, and she wanted to homeschool the kids, and so, which she was doing. So she's literally living her dream. And I feel like I built a lifestyle that I don't even get to participate in. And I'm resentful of Donna because she actually gets to enjoy the fruits of my labor. You can see how off base I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So trust me, I realize now, look in the mirror, right? I was the one that created this negative environment, right? There's times, I'm like, hey, I got a charity dinner tonight. Donna's probably thinking, oh, thank goodness, he won't be home till 9, right?
Yeah.
You know what it is what we've had to learn to do, Donna and I, is really, number one, it's good communication. Open, honest, you got to create a safe place. And, and we did that recently. I said, this was a few months back, and I sat down, I said, Donna, I want to schedule a time for us to sit down and have an hour and just talk about what is the vision for our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's what it feels like for me. The direction it's heading right now does not feel good. I don't feel connected. I don't know how you feel. And I want to share with you what I want. And what I want is awesome, amazing, intimate, partnership, everything. And so we sat down for an hour and a half and just talked about what we both wanted, what wasn't working. It got emotional. We probably both cried a couple times. And out of that, like, we got closer than ever. And we both realized, there's stuff we both need to work on to move that direction, right? And let's work on it together. And maybe we need some help to work on that together, because sometimes when you get yourself in that position, it's hard to get yourself out of it. Yeah. I mean, that you guys know that better than anybody. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think the communication, but also then it's incumbent upon anybody listening, the husband and the wife, man or woman, to create a space where it's actually safe for the other person to share. Mm-hmm. That was something I wasn't very good at, because she would come and share something to me, and guess what? I would get defensive, or I'd argue, or I didn't like it, so I'd try to tell her why she was wrong. Well, if we want to have good communication, how willing would she be to go do that the next? And vice versa, right? She would do that to me. I mean, we had some bad patterns in our communication. We didn't have good boundaries, right? When I come home, I can't just come home and then sit on the couch on my laptop and be totally zoned into work. And I'm on my laptop here, and she's on the other side of the couch watching TV. Even though we're in the same room, that's not quality time, right? Mm-hmm. She doesn't feel any like level of being loved, or so. I know that's the first thing that popped to my head, Robert.
No, that's good. You hit all the key points. All the key things. I mean, because when you throw out communication, everybody throws out, oh, you got to be good communicator. People just think about that as talking, right? Mm-hmm. But what you're talking about is creating a safe space, right? Because we all get triggered, especially when the topic is a little bit intense, right? It's going to be emotionally triggering. So how do you create a safe space? Schedule the time to talk about it, right? And it's great that you recognize, hey, and it's great. Yeah, let's plan for an hour. Let's carve out an hour, even though when an hour and a half, great. But the fact that you said identified, let's carve out an hour to be face to face, and let's talk about this, and not just kind of keep letting it go down, just kind of putting it under the rug and just letting it kick the can down the street, right? But actually scheduling the time to do that. And
well, and I thought that was important because, in the past I've said, hey, you know what? Let's talk about the vision of our life. And I don't know if she might not be ready to talk about that. Or maybe, I know my wife, she likes to think and process and be prepared. And if I spring something on her like that and go into like a deep issue, I'm not setting it up for success. So it's good. I've learned over time I have to recognize that. How do people want to communicate, right? She's not a verbal processor like me,
Mm-hmm.
right? If one of you guys are a total verbal processor, we just sit down for 2 hours and have this whole back and forth, and it would be wonderful. But maybe, Robert, you're like Donna, where you just,
like Donna.
I want to show up, I want to think through this, and then I could really engage. I don't know if that's the case, but
well, it's interesting. We are different. It depends on the situation, because Kaylee needs it processed too, and so do I. But as she's processing, she doesn't want to be verbal about it. But then she still needs time to process. So she's both an external processor
and then if I'm really like being the auditory processor, then it overwhelms him. He's like, "What, honey? You got 500 ideas, million ideas for me to do," because he's the implementer. So I can keep just rattling him off. And he's like, "Okay, you need to slow down here. I can't do all this."
Yeah, because I got to ask too. I said, "Are you asking me a specific question, or are you just processing?" Because sometimes I want to respond to something, but I'm like, I think she's just talking. And I need to sit back and just let it go. But yeah, no, you're right. Every couple's like that, right? It's usually an internal and external processor. So identifying that is huge, because us and of course clients and friends, they try each other crazy sometimes when they're trying to, one's trying to verbal processing externally, and the other one's like getting overwhelmed. But good stuff, John. I mean, that was great. I mean, you hit some key points there, like I said, and certainly, as far as dealing with issues, and I mean, it's kind of interesting. I don't know how different it is of dealing with conflict at home versus dealing with conflict that you deal with professionally. Like, say, you're on your way to Top Gun, and then something happened, right? And so, kind of walk us through that, and then what was going on. You're dealing with that both there, but I'm sure you're having conversations at home about this too. So, what happened there? And as you're kind of on that route towards Top Gun.
You mean early on? You mean?
Yeah.
Well, that was hard, really hard for both of us, because think about it, especially with the popularity of the movie, and now I'm flying F-14s, and I did combat tours, and my identity had been built around what I did, not who I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense, right? I was a naval aviator. I was a fighter pilot. I was an officer, and and all of that got taken away. So people are wondering what happened. I got orders to go to Top Gun, and then before I got there, I was playing softball, and I got hit with a line drive in the right eye, and I had a blow-up fracture, and I had some nerve damage. So I went there and did some instructing on the ground, but I never got to fly again. And then the Navy processed me out because I had lost my medical. And so I'm sitting there, Robert, knocking on doors, trying to sell a cell phone to somebody who's, at home during the day, so I could pay my bills. And the sounds of my dreams were flying over my head back into Miramar.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I was depressed. I was angry. I was bitter. I think I quit. And I was used to a culture of excellence in the military. I did not find that in the civilian sector. The lack of integrity shocked me, in my opinion. I think in the first year I was out living there in Miramar, I probably had 5 or 6 jobs. I would just quit because people didn't have integrity. Donna would come home from work and my car would be there. She'd be like, "Again?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll find something else." Right. But that was really hard. But it was during that period of time, though, I was in a bookstore and I'm like, I got to learn more about business, because I was a sales rep. I'm like, I want to get into business. And I didn't know anything about business. And I met a guy in the bookstore. We hit it off. He was the principal of a high school, and he just started mentoring me. He helped me kind of figure out what I'm good at, what are my skills. And he's also a guy of very strong faith, and he led me to a personal faith that I had. And then Donna had no interest in that at the time, by the way. So it was this really interesting year of our life where I was kind of all in with this whole new, what that relationship and people I was meeting through church. And she's like, pass. And I'll never forget one night, this was just great advice, just life advice. Because it was probably 1 a.m. Donna still wasn't home. She was still out partying with all of our own friends. I'd kind of lost interest in that. And I was focusing on what next. And I was fit to be tied. I was ready to just light her up when she got home. And I called this friend of mine, Jeff. And he goes, "Well, let me ask you a question. So I'll go a little spiritual here." But he said, "Listen, God loved you unconditionally your whole life, and he waited for your timing. What if you just love Donna unconditionally, and whatever she chooses, you just keep loving her no matter what?" I'm like, "Well, dude, no, I want to I'm mad right now. So you know what? I just decided at that point, regardless of what she does, I love her and I love our marriage and our friendship. And so I just poured myself into how do I become a better person so that she's attracted to what's going on in my life, and just love her, that no matter what, she just feels loved every day. And in that, during that period of time, I believe that was the path that got us together, because then she came to, about almost a year after I did, her own faith. And then that for us has been really foundational, this bedrock for us on how we've gotten through a lot of stuff. But that's kind of what happened. And then that kind of set the tone. I think what we learned during coming together in a period that probably most couples would not have made it. We didn't have any kids. There was nothing holding us together except our marriage vows and our love for each other at the time. And the fact that we came together so strongly is really allowed us to get through some serious, highs and some serious lows that were to come. We've been married 34 years. So we've trust me, we've been through the grinder a few times, both relationally, financially, business, health, and you name it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, well, it's not funny, but it's kind of funny looking back, I guess, is that you're a fighter pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're facing death every time you go off, even in just like a practice run. You get
True.
taken down by a fastball.
I'm telling Robert, can he come up with a better story than that? He's a top coach.
It's like slipping in the kitchen,
Yeah, it's like.
Well, I wanted to tell people I got hit with a flak burst over Baghdad, but that's that would be a much better story. I could use ChatGPT now and actually completely fabricate that. Maybe that's
But so I don't I don't know what would be more depressing, being taken down by a fastball or actually taken down by some kind of mortar round or something like that. So, as far as like
probably the softball. It's just embarrassing. Like, why don't you fly anymore? Because I'm an idiot.
Well, some people never recover from that kind of stuff. You see it like in high school, the star quarterback, you know what I mean? He doesn't go to college, doesn't end up doing anything with his life, but he's still living in that high school football days, like 30, 40 years later. He's just living in that high, the good old days. But you were able to get yourself.
Bring it back to that advice my dad gave me. And I think that, it's about reframing things. Anybody out there, you've been through a hard spot. You've been maybe through some failures, but I'll guarantee you've also had some successes.
Yeah.
And the question is, what are you telling yourself? You're telling yourself is, no, I could work hard, but it might not work out again. Well, who cares? You got to live anyway. You're going to, live till you're 70 or 80. So why not go find somebody who's dug themselves out of the hole that you're in, and they've gotten back to a place where, at least things are stable. I mean, there's points where I'm going backwards financially. I mean, my first business I started because I was so immature. I was still coming out of this Navy transition. I still had a huge ego. And I started the company with my best friend. And I not only destroyed our relationship, but that company never succeeded. I was not ready to be in partnership with a friend in business at that point. But there's also in all of that was about a year and a half of really hard work. And we made a little, actually we came out of that without having made any money. But there are some things that I did well during that period of time. And I also had to ask myself, what did I learn about me, right? About how I work with other people. What are some things that did work? How do I need to change to do this better next time? And then I got the next job. So I kept trying to build and not frame it as a failure, but look at everything I went through and say, okay, what can I learn from that? And what did I do well that can help me just succeed even with this next small step? Because you know what? I want to live a great life. I want to have an impact in the world. I want to have a great marriage. I want to have, like, all three of my boys, they're 25, 24, and 20 now. They're probably some of my best friends. I didn't have that with my parents at all. I started developing that with my dad really around the high school, college time frame. My dad worked 6 days a week. He was never home. But so I think it's about how I approached it in my mindset, Kaylee. And the work I do with my clients, whether they're CEO of a Fortune 50 company or somebody running a nonprofit down here, some of the hardest areas and where we also have the most growth is working in the areas of mindset. And I would tell everybody out there, if you haven't read it, go read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. And it defines the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And what you described, Kaylee, is a fixed mindset. And all of us have it. And it's not right or wrong. It just is. I think a lot of it's how we're wired, and a lot of it is what the culture gives us today. Is almost this shade of negativity and doubt. It's just kind of natural. But how do we overcome it? And it can be overcome. Matter of fact, I know it can. So mindset is a big part of it, both toward a marriage or a business or even myself.
Well, that's great, John. So tell us a little bit, as we kind of wrap up here. I mean, I feel like I can go on for hours. So I think that's why, again, after off camera, I know Kaylee is going to pitch us to really go to Italy because she's got more questions for you.
Let me figure that out myself. You're going to scare the guy.
And then, but all seriousness, no, but we are having a great time. But as we wrap up, you talk to us a little bit about the work you do now. Went from fighter pilot to, starting a couple businesses and all that. And then now what you're doing now with executive coaching and speaking. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So, I guess the quick story is I'd started a company 12 years ago, and 5 months into that, I was involved in what should have been a fatal horse riding accident. They put me in the hospital for 2 years. Had a severe traumatic brain injury. My left eye's blind. Donna had to be my caregiver for 2 years. We did not have an income for 3 years. So I was 45 years old. Imagine being 45, three kids, no income for 3. We lost everything. And I had a brain injury, so I could only work coming out of all this about 8 or 9 hours a week. And I'm and a friend of mine said, John, with your background, you need to be a leadership and executive coach. And if you want to become one, I'll be your first client. And that conversation with that guy, Greg, is what started me down this road. And I went and got certified. I studied it. I realized kind of this coaching approach has been my leadership style for, my career, my whole career. So it started out with just working with, a couple of CEOs, and I found out I was really good at it. I was helping people double their companies, get balance at home, build their marriages, really almost eliminate turnover on their team, create great cultures. And that just led to most of my business has been through referral. I've had to do very little marketing. And so it grew and grew and grew. And then I started adding capacity. And now today, we have 11 coaches on the team. We were named the preferred leadership trainer for the U.S. Air Force. We do a lot of work with the Air Force and the Space Force. Our work with the government is expanding. We do one-on-one coaching. We do strategic planning, leadership training. And then in organizations, I do some work one-on-one with real high capacity executives. But what I love to do is come in and work with the team. My ideal client is a mission-driven CEO. Like, they know why they're building their company, and they know the impact that company can have, not only in the lives of the people that they are in the company and that they serve, but also in the community, right? I'm looking for people that understand kind of generosity. And our goal is to come in, and we can do this, is help them double in the first 1 to 2 years, create a culture that people don't want to leave. And I do a lot of work because it's been so important to me, and that's why I love the work you guys do. And your book, Tandem, is so awesome. Is that, how do I help that leader, man or woman, also succeed at home? Because I don't believe in a work-life balance because it's way too integrated and woven together. Here's what I know is if your marriage can get better, your relationship with your kids can get better, right? You understand your priorities and your boundaries, and you have shared goals and visions in both places, you can be more effective. And then how do you help somebody at work be more effective? If you are, I love this book. I can't remember who wrote it, but it's called Rising Above the Level of Mediocrity. And his philosophy is you can't rise above the level of mediocrity at any point, anywhere in your life, right? If this part of your life is failing, you can fake it over here for a while, but there's this gravity that pulls it back to that level. That makes sense. Yeah. So those are the kind of, I love working with the whole team. So our typical client would be anywhere from $5 to $50 million in revenue. Those are the companies that we can just really, really help accelerate. what they're doing.
Yeah.
And our team loves to do the work. We do the work on the operations. We do interim executive work. We do coaching, strategic planning. We do a lot of different things. We have some really unique approaches that we think set us apart. But I love the work I get to do because I'm working with real people that are on fire for life. They love their people. They want to see their people thrive, and they want to make it a positive impact in the world. And they want to do it while having, a great life, on the evenings and weekends too.
Yeah.
And I think we can have all that.
Yep.
And I also believe, this is my core philosophy, that every employee deserves an amazing place to work and a manager that cares about who they are as a person.
Yeah.
So put those two together, and that is what we get to facilitate. And I love it.
Awesome. Well, great, John. Well, thanks for
Thank you.
sharing your story, sharing your heart. It's amazing stuff. And, hopefully we get to our paths cross physically. So we get to break some bread, share some vino or bourbon, whatever.
That'd be awesome.
So thank you again for coming on. And for you listening, I know this has been impactful. So go ahead and you need to share this with another entrepreneur that really needs to hear this. And of course, please, we'd love a review as well. So thank you. And until next week, God bless. Thank you for listening to the Thriving in Tandem podcast. Please visit our website, marriedentrepreneur.co, for a variety of free resources to help your marriage and business succeed.
And feel free to leave us a review and share this episode with another married entrepreneur. That would mean so much to us.
See you next week.